I'm Sam Yates, and welcome everyone. We've got really great interest from all around the planet: UK, US, Canada, APAC. Such a good group to have here. And yeah, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Marty Cagan to you. Marty is the founder of Silicon Valley Product Group. He's the author of some great books: Inspired, Empowered, Transformed. And he's the person that really defined what we now know as the product operating model. And yeah, Marty, as Maria said, the SSH community that we've got here today, as long champion a focus on outcomes, value, over output, empowered teams. This conversation that we're having right at the middle or early in this AI shift, it's just such a critical time, and we're really, just thrilled to have you here to share some insights. Uh, I'm gonna uh, I'm gonna ask you a bunch of questions, Marty, and then what we'll do, I'll save some time at the end of the call where we can get some input from the group. And so Maria will keep an eye on the chat, and we'll loop back to that as we get nearer to the end of the call. But yeah, let's get into it, Marty. Thanks. Hey, Marty, so you defined the product operating model, and we're seeing more and more companies say that they're embracing or embedding it in their organizations. What does good look like
Mhm.
when a company is genuinely living in the product operating model?
Well, yeah, and to be clear, we didn't invent it. All we did is observe that some companies work a certain way, which we actually didn't even come up with the name. If I remember right, it was Atlassian that sort of convinced me, an Aussie company there, that they had this term for it, but we didn't want to make a new name. But the idea was there was a set of principles that we saw in the best performing companies. Nobody's perfect, of course, but um, in terms of consistently innovating, consistently delivering outcomes, there's a set of companies that have proven their ability to do that, and most companies not so much. And so what we did was just sort of we had sort of the lucky thing about what we do is we worked with a lot of those good companies, and so we were able to see. I mean, Atlassian's one example, but they have their own names for things. You go to Apple, they have their own names for things. You go to Spotify in Stockholm, they have their very own and unique nomenclature for things. Amazon, same thing. But they're really defining the same thing. They just have their own nomenclature for it. So we just wanted to distill the principles there. And none of the principles, in my opinion, are rocket science. There's 20 product principles. There's things like if you want to innovate, you better experiment. If you another principle is what matters is actually outcomes, not output. So things that are, I think, pretty common. But if you look at most companies which use what we call the project model, um, there's very little outcomes. There's a whole interesting discussion about the happier dimension. If you know me, you know I believe most people are miserable in the job, and it's terrible crime. And I try to show people that there's a reason these miserable people are working in this project model, which is not the job they really signed up for. Now, it's also true, you don't hear me pitch, oh, you'll be happier if you work this way, because that's not really what appeals to the people I have to convince, which is the CEO. What appeals to them is that business outcome. To me, it's just a very nice benefit that that the people working there feel that they're doing a lot more meaningful work, and they feel like they have a lot more agency, a lot more ability to make a difference, and people love that.
Mm.
Yeah, no. So anyway, that's sort of where it came from. You were asking me what does good look like? what good looks like is those 20 principles are lived every day. Um, they show up though in lots of different ways because those principles span how you decide what to work on, product strategy. They span product discovery. How do you figure out a good solution worth building? They span product delivery. How do you actually build and deploy this to your customers in good ways? And by the way, safe ways is part of that. Not damaging your customer, not ruining your reputation, putting your revenue at risk. So there is a dimension there as well. Also talks about culture. So good is really along those dimensions. And the bottom line, the way you know it's actually working is delivering business results.
Mm. Hey, yeah, you've recently called some of the layoffs that are happening around the industry as the moment that exposed product management theater. How would you, if you had to make a decision on a PM whether uh, to keep them or not, what would you look for? What's the most common signals or the best signals that someone is operating
Yeah,
well in the model?
think what I was describing is that it's there's always been these multiple models out there, and that at least one of them, probably two, is at risk. And Gen AI is really shining a light on that problem. And yes, it's especially in certain parts of the world like Europe, there's you can already see the market reacting. Um, but anyway, those three models, those three, and model is a dangerous word now because I don't mean large language model. We'll talk about them. They're
Mm,
very relevant, but I'm actually referring to product development models. And there's a lot of conceptual models out there is what's going on. But the three forms of product, the one that is dominant in a lot of the world, as you'll see, the US has different problems. This is not the dominant problem in the US, but in a lot of the world, the dominant problem is they're the agile product owner model, which is really a delivery team model. It's all about delivery. That's not even a product role. It's a delivery role, but it's called product owner. It should be covered by the product manager, but in a lot of the world, there is no product manager. All you have are these
mm,
backlog administrators. Those people, they already were in trouble, and then Gen AI came along and basically is making agile largely irrelevant. I don't like what I just said there. I mean, the principles behind the manifesto, I believe, are still very relevant, but that's not what people do. They run these crazy processes, and those processes are what's being obsolesced. So though that role is got a target on its back, and I have a lot of friends, especially in Europe, that have that job, and I'm trying to encourage them all to up level their skills as fast as humanly possible.
mm,
So that's more of a race against the clock. The second model is really the dominant one in the U.S., and I say that regrettably. I wish it was the one that I think there's lots of evidence is the best, but it's not. The one that's the most common in the US is known as the project model. And that's where, you'll recognize it. That's basically where executives and stakeholders and certain customers with big wallets, they end up driving roadmaps of features and projects. And eventually that roadmap, the item on a roadmap, the feature gets to a product team. Product manager, somebody with that title, typically tries to flesh out the requirements. They bring in a designer, try to flesh out a design. They eventually bring it to the engineers, and engineers are usually doing some form of agile. So they do some number of sprints and they ship it. Uh, Now that's output from the beginning to the end. It's somebody's idea of this will solve something. Almost always there's a real problem behind it, But the issue, it would be a lot better if they would just say, this is the problem we need you to solve, but they don't. They say, we need this feature because this competitor has this feature, or this company says they're going to leave us without this feature. It's just the language of the way it works. And so, and of course, what we know empirically, there was a big Harvard Review thing that came out a couple of years ago that sort of quantified it, but we know that about 85% of the things on the roadmap do not deliver the outcome that was hoped. So the performance has never been very good. But more to the point about job satisfaction, that job, even though it's called a product manager most of the time, it used to be called a business analyst, which was actually more accurate for that way of working. But in that model, you might have this nice title of product manager, but kind of everybody knows you're not a product manager. You're a project manager. You're herding the cats. You're collecting the requirements. You're getting the designer and the engineers lined up. You're making sure things are done. Now that's worthy work. It's important work, but it's not product management. You're not actually coming up with the solution to the problem. And you can't even be held accountable to outcomes because you're not even the one coming up with that feature idea. So it's a frustrating job. Most people complain about that job. There's very few people that say they actually enjoy doing that job, but it's a job, right? I mean, it does pay the bills for a lot of people, and a lot of people are hoping that they could get a chance to show their leaders they're capable of much more. So then the third model is, of course, what we're all about sharing, which is the product operating model. And in that model, instead of a bunch of roadmap of features and projects, we are given problems to solve. So they could be customer problems, or they could be our customers, our own company problem, or sometimes they're both. But the idea is that your product leaders come up with a product strategy. And the purpose of a product strategy is to identify the most important problems for us to solve this quarter, for example. And then those problems are given to teams. And then the team starts, the first thing they have to do when they're given a problem to solve and an outcome to achieve is they need to solve it. They need to come up with a solution that hopefully solves for the customer and solves for your business. What that really means is that the solution is valuable. A customer will choose to buy it or choose to use it. It's usable. They can figure out how to use it. It's feasible. We have the technology, the skills, the time to build it. And it's viable, meaning for our company, it works. It satisfies the constraints. We can market it. We can sell it. We can service it. We can fund it. We can monetize it. It's legal, it's compliant, that's viability. We have to solve for those 4 risks in order to know that we can achieve our outcome. And then, and that's what we're doing in discovery. And once we have evidence, sometimes it's just your judgment, sometimes it's statistically significant proof, depending on what's at stake. And then once we do have that evidence, though, then the engineers build a production quality implementation, something that your customers can run their business on. Recently, I've adopted a friend of mine who actually spends a lot of time in Australia, so you might have known him, is Jeff Patton. He coined the term product discovery is build to learn, and product delivery is build to earn. And the point is, especially with Gen AI, we're all builders, but we're building for different reasons and usually with different tools and techniques. But we're building. We're either building to figure out if we know the solution we need, or we're building that solution. And there's a lot of different ways people have for describing discovery and delivery, but that one is really resonating with people because the Gen AI tools have really put a focus on building, because it's never been faster to build.
I might come back to the skills point in a minute, but just while we're on the discovery topic, with AI, in this AI accelerated world where it can generate convincing prototypes, roadmaps, PRDs, uh, yeah, what does good discovery really look like? And yeah, where should we be focusing, on building that muscle?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the answer, what good looks like is that you generate the outcomes. So that's the part that you're not going to hallucinate that. That is, that's either happens or not. Now, the way you described it, like you're right. You can use Gen AI tools to generate PRDs, to generate prototypes. Somebody even showed me they used the tool to generate a persuasive video to convince an executive to sign off on a prototype. And I'm like, yes, you can do that. That is not in your interest or theirs. That is not. You do not want to try to sell a stakeholder on an idea. Their job is to make
Hmm.
sure that that will work for the business. So, you know, waving your hands and saying, "Oh, it's beautiful," doesn't do anybody any good. So that is not what we're trying to do. Most people have figured out they can use tools, uh, but it makes no sense. All they're doing is just accelerating the project model. What we want to do is use tools to help us make good product decisions. So the
Hmm.
tools are there. It's really how you use them, and more importantly, it's are you delegating to the tool or are you amplifying your thinking with the tool? So
Hmm.
if you delegate, and a lot of people are literally showing their bosses right now that they can be replaced by some agentic AI.
So
So,
there's
and
so
go
there's
ahead.
a question actually from Matt Ring in the chat that might be a good one to loop in here. Matt, are you there? Did you want to pop yourself off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Hey, Marty. So kind of stepping up just a little bit higher here. So we know generative AI is disrupting how we build software. So I'm seeing some renewed interest in stronger product strategy so that we can know where to experiment, so we can focus where to experiment. So what advice do you have for product leaders that don't feel like this is a strong muscle that are trying to work this muscle?
Well, good, first of all, right? Good. That's so let's step back for a second. There's always been these three aspects to creating products. The first is what you're referring to. We have to decide what areas we're going to invest in, right? That's the sort of the first level. That's really product strategy. In the language of the product model, that's identifying the most important problems to solve. So that's number one, because obviously you're going to work on something. How do you decide what to work on? This product strategy does this. Now, there's more to say about that I want to come back to, but at the first level, it's what are we going to work on? The second level is once we've identified a problem to solve, we have to solve it. And that's product discovery. That's actually where the experiments happen, not in strategy. They happen in discovery. And discovery is really rapid experiments on the order of 10 to 50 a week. I mean, we can go so fast today in discovery with the new tools. And then once we have the evidence to build, the third big thing that has to be done is build, right? And that's the part so far that has changed the most dramatically with Gen AI. Because as everybody knows, Gen AI is a very good match for programming languages. And tools like Claude Code are changing the game there. They're changing the economics. And so that is what that's done is for the last 50 years, all of us, CEOs on down, believe that the bottleneck really was our engineers. They're the most expensive line item. It takes forever to get anything shipped. We have all this tech debt. It's a nightmare. And all of a sudden, people are realizing, yes, we can get stuff down in a fraction of the time now, but our outcomes are not really changing. So what does that mean? What it means is that yes, time-wise and money-wise, engineering was the bottleneck, but the real bottleneck was actually what you were building. And that's
Hmm.
become very clear to people. So the focus has moved to discovery and, to your point, to strategy. So with those sort of three in mind, let's go back to it. I already pointed out that the experiments are really happening in discovery. Now, sometimes based on the result of an experiment, it will change the strategy. That's usually a very good thing when that happens. It means you came across something that's sort of a breakthrough, and that's great. But for the most part, the strategy derives the discovery, because the strategy is making these big choices. The product leaders are responsible for product strategy because they're holistic. It applies to all the teams, but each team is responsible for discovery and delivery of that problem and solution. The leaders, you're right, Matt, a lot of leaders are going, okay, now I see why this is so important. It was something we did like as an annual exercise that really didn't do much before, but now we realize it's right at the center of everything. And we need to build these muscles. How do we do this? And so great that so many people have finally started to realize this is the job of the leaders. Um, and anyway, we say strategy, but what that really means is it starts with a vision of what you're trying to accomplish over the next several years. And then that vision drives architecture. It drives team topology. Team topology is, so how many product teams do you need? And what is each team responsible for? And what skills are needed in each of those teams? That's team topology. So we identify the most important problems to solve in the product strategy. And those problems are meant to, each one is meant to chip away at our vision to get us closer to the vision. The vision, though, again, is 3, 5, 10 years out. The product strategy is what are we going to work on this quarter? So we need to know us very specifically. So it's towards our vision, but we have to pay the bills along the way. So that's what product strategy is. And some people are great at product strategy. Some companies like Stripe is fantastic at product strategy. They take it so seriously. Apple is very good at product strategy for sure. And companies that are good at product strategy are almost always very good at product vision as well. And then ultimately, you have a set of problems to solve and you have a set of teams that are capable of solving problems. So you assign those problems to the teams. And that's actually what OKRs were invented for. They've been convoluted in a lot of companies, but that was what Andy Grove was creating them for. So OKRs are meant to be assigned to a product team to solve. That's O is the problem to solve, the objective, and the key results are the outcomes we're trying to achieve. So,
While we're
sorry, go ahead.
while we're on the topic of teams, what do you see the future of a team looking like? What are the key roles, the size? We've had two pizza teams in the past. We're moving towards much smaller teams. What's your view of where this lands
Yeah, this is
now?
a big topic, really, but a really good, important topic. Um, so there's a number of moving pieces. The first is the average team size is already going down. Right. Now, the average team size used to be like one product manager, one designer, and like 5 to 7 engineers as an average. And that's gone down to like 2 to 3 engineers. And some companies, some companies are further than others. The whole technology adoption curve is playing out as we speak. But the average team size is going down. A lot of things get easier when they get smaller too. Of
Mm.
course, putting aside that in some companies, they're going down because companies are laying off people. Of course, we're hoping that's not really what happens. What we're hoping is companies build more products, sell more services, but this remains to be seen. So put aside for a minute the human impact of this. You have, I will tell you, when you are on a smaller team, you're generally a lot happier than if you're on a bigger team. The other thing that's going on at the same time is that the scope of what a product team is responsible for is expanding, which is actually something teams have wanted for decades because it's very unempowering when you might be given all this authority and responsibility, but you're only able to impact this little sliver
Mm.
of technology. And if you feel like you have to depend on 10 other teams to get anything done, you don't feel very empowered and you don't feel very autonomous. So the idea that a product team could have more end-to-end responsibility is really a good thing for teams. And this is referred to as cognitive load. In other words, there's only so much our brains can wrap our head around. But with Gen AI tools, we can actually wrap our heads around a lot bigger bulk of something. And so a smaller number of bigger scope teams with average team size smaller, that's one whole thing that's going on. The other big thing that's going on are the roles on the team. Now, this is where it really depends if you're talking the project model or the product model. Because in the project model, which most people are still using, in the project model, you're just basically turbocharging what was going on before. You're speeding up the ability to get something from roadmap into your customer's hands. And so, yeah, if that turns out to be good stuff, then it's good stuff faster. But if it's no different, the outcomes don't change. In the product model, we still have a product manager, a designer, and an engineering tech lead right at the center. Some things are the same and some things have changed. One of the things that's changed is that up until about 2 years ago, the product manager depended on the designer or the engineer to prototype for most teams, for most prototypes. Today, anybody on the team can prototype. So building to learn can be done by anyone and should be. I mean, that's a really good thing for the world. What hasn't changed is that an engineer, an experienced tech lead, a product designer, and a product manager each bring a different lens to that prototype. So the designer is looking at it through the lens of the user experience, the holistic user experience. The engineer is looking at it through the lens of feasibility and technical implementation. And is this just now possible? What can we do? And the product manager is looking at it through the lens of value. Will people buy this? And viability. Will it satisfy the needs of the business? And so the roles of the three are still there. The difference is they have the ability to all build to learn instead of just, depending on waiting on mostly our designer for most of the prototypes. So if you double click, there's more changes. Like we have always had 4 kinds of prototypes that are very popular. And even today, those are the same 4 kinds. The difference is with the Gen AI tools, the kind of prototype that used to be the most valuable, but also the most expensive is now almost as cheap as the other kinds. And so that has really been a good thing for product teams because they can get very high fidelity live data prototypes in just hours or 1 or 2 days. And that used to be measured in weeks.
Mm. Hey, just on roles and picking up on a question from Tim in the chat as well. A friend recently presented on the specialization trap of software engineering over the last decade being reduced to coding. Now AI is writing the code. The specialization of coding is a real risk. Product similar things have happened in product management. But yeah, as the role definition might have devolved, or been reduced, what advice would you give to engineers, product managers, who are stuck in this role title, in their organization, where the leaders can't see through that? What could I do to future-proof my role? Demonstrate these values and these principles day to day.
Yeah. Well, this is where I don't want to pretend. For some people, their job is in jeopardy because their job is defined really by some tasks that are easy to automate. Now, that's not the roles I've been talking about. The product owner, unfortunately, is. In fact, the models can generate stories better than most product people. So that is not really enough of a job. In general, when we look at a product manager, a designer, or an engineering tech lead, there is judgment at the center of it, right? There is judgment in each of those. Now, different kind. We call product manager's judgment product sense, which I can describe how we build that. Designers have something called design sense, and engineers, we don't really call it engineering sense, but we do call it architectural knowledge, right? They know how these big complex systems fit together. Every one of us has that foundation, but then we also have a number of tasks to do. What's being automated are the tasks. If all your job was the tasks, you're in trouble. If your job was the judgment, but you just had to do the tasks, that's something we're kind of all used to and has happened over millennia. So I feel pretty good about that. This is why my main point to people, whether you're a product manager, designer, or an engineer, is it's your thinking that's valued. So using the tools to amplify your thinking, to enable you to make better judgment is good. Using the tools to replace your thinking is not. If you can do that, then you're not necessary is sort of the point.
You mentioned product sense. Can you share a bit about that? What does it look like? How do you develop it? Yeah.
Sure. Well, the first thing that's important to realize is that some people think it's innate. You're either born with it or you're not, but it's just one of those myths that's just not true. You build and earn product sense. I know I've had to do it several times. And for, if you want to lead a product, you have to do your homework is what we used to call it. Today, we know we call that product sense. You've earned that product sense. What does it really mean? And this is different depending on the role, but for a product manager, it starts with deep understanding of your users and customers. And then it's got deep understanding of the data your users generate, the data that your product generates, and how that data changes over time. Deep knowledge of how the KPIs of the data. In other words, what is the health of your product in your business? Deep knowledge of your industry and deep knowledge of your company. This is usually the hardest for people. In other words, how does your product actually get to market? What are the strengths and limitations of your sales channel, your marketing strategies, your services model? How does this work? How do you monetize your product? What are the compliance issues? Every company has a long list of, really hurdles that you have to deal with in order to have a successful product. It's actually this is the part people don't talk about. It's not very hard to come up with something that your users actually love. It is hard to come up with something they love and will keep you in business. So that's what we're trying to do. Sorry, go ahead, Maria.
Oh, it's okay. Sorry, Marty. This might be a good time to bring in Maria Raymond's question. Maria, if you wanted to come off mute and ask your question.
Thanks, Maria. Hi, Marty. Great to be here and listen to the conversation. I do have a question about organizations who aren't necessarily, a tech company. What we actually refer to them as tech second, right? So their core business is not SaaS, not software. Product model has become very popularized.
To be clear, though, Maria, that's almost every company, including the ones I name dropped. Is Tesla a software company? Tesla's a car company, right?
Yeah.
Is Netflix a tech company? No, they're an entertainment company. People misunderstand that all the time. So when I say product model, it's not a true tech company like maybe Oracle selling a database. Is that what you're thinking?
Look, I'm with you, but I often get the challenge from these organizations, and I'm referring to government and enterprise predominantly, and they'll say to me, I'm not a Stripe, we're not a Google, we're not a whatever, right? and there is a contest, around where they try to distinguish themselves as non-product. But I'm with you, and that's why I'm here, right? I think the product operating model is very relevant for these organizations as much as it is for, a true SaaS product organization. But listen, the question is, in these settings, a lot of the time they aren't building their software, they're buying it off the shelf, right? It's procured SaaS. And those products span business unit functions. And it comes back to a point you made earlier about product ownership versus product management. It becomes really difficult to nominate a product manager for an ERP type solution that spans the entire enterprise, because it needs to be carved up, if you will, across domains and across functions.
So I totally understand. In fact, I published an article that talks about this explicitly. But I always am worried people will try to apply the product model where it's not relevant. And you're describing, I tell people, this is referred to as traditional IT. Traditional IT. In other words, they're buying, they're not building. If you're not building, the product model's not for you. By the way, same was really true. Agile oversold itself that way. It wasn't. It's for if you're building. If you're not building, and think of it this way, how could you possibly empower a team and hold them accountable to results when they don't even control the product?
I'm with you. Can I offer some context though? In these settings, and now with the modern architectures that these SaaS products offer, there are extensibility layers on those platforms, right? And so there are build teams developing, these bolt-on products on top of the platform, and that's where it starts to get super interesting, because you're right, at a platform level, you're not building, you're integrating the product and configuring it, right? But there are levels now, high levels of customization and extension on these products, and that's where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah, but this has always been the case, actually. It's true that, especially with Gen AI and MCP, this is going to become even more common. But this has always been the case. At one level, everybody on the internet pretty much is built on AWS from Amazon. Does that mean they're not building? No, they're building. They're just getting a platform product, Amazon Web Services, which they're building on. Thousands of companies build on top of Force.com from Salesforce. Now, there's a judgment here. A lot of companies, all they're doing, they're not building. They're just a little bit of customization. And they don't have the ability to actually change something and change a business outcome. All they have the ability to do, and they're totally dependent on, the SaaS product that was delivered. So that's why traditional IT, you have to look on a case-by-case basis. And most of the time that they do build those custom solutions, it doesn't even make sense for them to use their own people to do that. That's where the Accentures of the world are more valuable, because that's not your core competency as a company. But if you do decide, like, we're going to build our own ERP system because SAP sucks or something like that, then the product model would make sense. You might be questioned on your strategy, because is that the best use of your resources to build another ERP system that you're not even going to sell? Or should you just go to one of the vendors? So if you look at the product model for traditional IT, and also, because you mentioned the government, which is a famous case for this, go look at the product model for government. Those two articles talk about these cases and where it's relevant and where it's not.
Hey, Marty, just while we're talking about sort of larger organizations, in large enterprise with legacy systems that are like, banks, telcos, that are wanting to become more product and customer oriented, the model can potentially feel out of reach because they're encumbered by those legacy, some of that legacy systems. How would you encourage or talk to a leader about finding that path of empowered teams without the traditional multi-year transformation journey?
Well, up until that last, without the journey, you have to do the work if you're going to do this. But
Yes.
so you mentioned banks. The biggest bank in the world, J.P. Morgan Chase, the CEO Jamie Dimon. Two of their most important divisions are beautiful examples of the product model today. I'm working with one of their leaders to show the product model at JP Morgan Chase. It's so they can absolutely do it. What's missing in most banks, honestly, is the leadership's desire to do this. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to do this. They believed they needed to. Now, you also have to be smart about it, especially bank. Do you know anybody more risk averse than the banks? I mean, so, but that doesn't mean they don't take risks. They're just smart about the risk. So that means they have divisions that have 10,000 employees in each division. They're not going to move all 10,000 at once. And we're the first people to tell them, don't do that. We say, run a pilot, create an experiment, use the product model to learn the product model. In other words, run a prototype of this. Just one team. See if you can actually generate business outcomes that you don't believe you could have got before. If it goes well, you can spread it out. And that's where it does take time. So you can do a real pilot in any company in 1 quarter or 2 quarters if you want. We usually say a quarter is usually enough. Sometimes companies like to do it for 2 quarters. At very low cost, at very low risk. Because you're not putting your business at risk. You're doing it for one team out of 100. So, and you're seeing how it goes. If it goes well, then you have the most important benefit if it goes well is that now you've established the bar. Now you really know what you need in a product manager, what you need in a designer, in your engineers, instead of just speculating. What do most companies do when they want to transform? Before they do any of this, they go get HR, they redefine jobs, they do training, and they have no clue what they're doing because they have never even seen it. So no, don't do that. Just run a low risk, low cost pilot. Let it prove itself. You're going to have any big company, you're going to have people that absolutely don't believe it will work, and they might be right in their company, but you have to see, and they'll only be convinced if they see the evidence.
I think that's it's great advice. Like in large organizations, where the CEO is looking across and they've got a thousand teams, and this new model is saying, let's experiment in 2 or 3 teams. Often like, I'm impatient. I want to move faster. Let's go. How do we do this across everything? And I think, well, we've seen firsthand, starting small and scaling up, is the more successful route. But often a CEO in that position where they're facing disruption and they just feel like they need to do something bigger.
Yeah, it's not
actually
usually
not.
a bank we're talking about there, right? Banks are too risk averse. They're also very few banks face disruption. They're basically oligopolies, so they're fine. They have to be convinced. There are cases where I meet that are companies that are truly being disrupted. And Amazon is going after their business, and they feel like we're going to be dead if we're not there. And so sometimes the truth is companies can do incredible things when they really are, their back is to the wall. We saw that during the pandemic. But most of the time, the leaders it's the opposite. They're scared to move that aggressively, and they want to be convinced it's going to work.
Mm. So Nosh had a question in the chat. There's a risk that companies are encouraging their teams, their engineers, and staff to token max. Spend their salaries in tokens. what happens if we hit a capacity limit on tokens
Go
or
ahead,
the
bro.
price of,
Go ahead, bro.
oh, or the price of tokens increases or becomes unavailable? Any
Well,
thoughts on that?
we should
Hmm.
realize what's going on. I mentioned something a minute ago called the technology adoption curve. This
Hmm.
happens with every new technology. I watched it with the internet. I watched it with PCs. I watched it with mobile. I mean, it happens with every. And what that means is there's a whole theory behind it. You can read Crossing the Chasm. It kind of documents the theory. But the idea is that there are some people that move very aggressively. Most people want to make sure it works before they really put money into it. And then there's some people that just on principle never want to change. They're the laggards. So that bell-shaped curve basically exists all the time. Normally, with a new technology, though, it can take a decade to work through the industry. Gen AI it's by far the fastest technology to move through the curve I've ever seen. Now it's still, I would argue, on the first half of the curve, the front of the curve.
Hmm.
It's still early, but what you're seeing are the many CEOs out there, mostly of small companies, that are saying, this is our chance. This is the future. We need to move now. And they are looking for ways to push people. I mean, in some companies, it's crazy. They're literally threatening to fire people that aren't doing this enough. And what they're trying to do, I understand, they're trying to push their company through the adoption curve faster. In other companies, one of my partners was telling me he was at a big bank in Singapore, and the teams want to move, but the compliance officers were like not so fast. And what they ended up doing was a special session with the compliance officers to explain to them really what was going on, let them get their hands on the technology themselves. And the result was the compliance officers changed their policy that week. So you can do it, but it takes time. That's what's going on. Token maxing is just another way people are trying to put this nudging on people to move forward. Because we all know there's a lot of people that are just like, in fact, a lot of my friends, because I'm of that age, a lot of my friends are like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not willing to put all my evenings into learning this stuff. Just, I'm just like done. And people are retiring early
Hmm.
in many cases because of that. And other people are never been happier as far as they feel like now they're doing the fun stuff. And because, for a developer working on tech debt, I mean, this was not necessarily fun. And so that's the curve at play. That's all. And
Hmm.
it's, there's a lot of different techniques. I think some of them are, they're all, I understand the intention of all of them. Some I think are better techniques than other. I tell a lot of leaders that if you have to tell a team to work harder, you have failed as a leader.
No, thanks. Uh, Maria, any other?
I think the question from Ryan Jewell. Ryan, if you're there, did you want to talk about, because it's on the theme of managing all the tensions and starting the transition, and this one just happens to be around kind of operational BAU things as well. So Ryan, did you want to go for it?
Sure, thank you. Um, so, I guess in a large enterprise that is still, a lot of people are interested in the product operating model, but a lot of teams are still kind of following project model practices, even if under the agile guise. So, what does that transition really look like in successful companies? I mean, you talk about small experiments, but when you can't just take a group of people off to the side, stop doing things the way they've been doing them to go try this product model for a little while, like, keep the lights on, work, business as usual, work still has to happen. What do the successful transitions really look like? How do we get going?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I should say, I literally wrote a 400-page book to answer that question. It's called Transformed, Moving to the Product Operating Model. None of the examples are Silicon Valley companies. They are all legacy companies that had to change. In other words, it's too easy. The companies, the sort of the famous ones, the Stripes of the world, they were born in the product model because their leaders had worked that way before. So it was much easier for them. But all the ones that we profile in there, they were all in the old project model and they all had to change. Uh, I have never seen a company in my 45 plus years that couldn't uh, do spin off or separate out, isolate a couple teams to be a pilot at all. Obviously, you want to use judgment when you pick that team. If they're in the middle of some business critical work, you're not going to interrupt them for anything. You're going to let them continue what they were doing. But it's not hard. The bigger the enterprise, the easier it is for them to peel off a team or two in order to do this as an experiment. So you can read about all the case studies. There's an amazing healthcare example from a huge U.S. healthcare company, Kaiser Permanente. There's one of my favorite examples was from the biggest travel company in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia has probably got, all of us have every advantage over what they have access to, and they completely took this brick and mortar company that was under threat from the two big U.S. travel mega companies, and they totally turned it around and they dominate in that region now. So and there's a bunch of examples from one in Brazil, another one in London. One of my favorites is Trainline. So these are all legacy companies that made that change. So, and the reason we wrote that book, honestly, is because so many people thought it wasn't possible to change, but we had known all these companies that were changing, and so we knew that wasn't true. And we just decided, and all the real names are there. You can reach out to them on LinkedIn and ask them, did you really say that or whatever, and they will tell you.
Hey, Marty, maybe to round us out, there's a question from Andy on, is there a current trend where many leaders are defining the most important problem to solve as being the need to use AI more?
No, I've never seen that because that's not a problem to solve. That might be a tactic we use, but that's not a problem to solve. These are customer problems. In fact, one of the we all this for product people right now, it can be frustrating because every single company in the world is racing to be able to say we do AI somehow, right? And 99% of it is marketing. These are just fluff features that are just there so they can say, and a lot of people will say, we're supposed to be empowered, but we're being forced to do this. And I'm like, cut them some slack. They're scared to death that all the competitors they'll be the only one that doesn't have this on the website. And so they're scared. So I said, this is almost done. Pretty much everybody very soon will be able to say, yeah, we do AI. And then it will be back to, are you actually doing anything useful?
Cool. And yeah, just to wrap, what's your take now? Is now the best time to be in product? What what are your thoughts? Just
I mean, if you're lucky enough to be at a product model company, you've probably seen your salary nearly double in the last year. It is wild. I've never seen anything like this. So if you're lucky enough to be one of those people, you're pretty happy right now. You're pretty happy. If you're not, if you're at one of these project model companies, you're feeling very stressed. And there's a lot of anxiety. So, it's why I do encourage people, because so many leaders, they really do want to change. They just don't know how. And if you can show some real initiative and show them that you're ready for this, show them what you can do, volunteer to be that pilot team. There's some great stories about that happening. And it's in fact one of the my fastest paths I've ever seen to getting promoted.
Mm.
Because that's what these companies need more of, is people that know how to do this.
Great. And on that note, we might wrap. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you again, Marty, for joining us today. Thanks for everyone, across the planet for dialing in at all sorts of different hours. And really appreciate it, Maria, for making the space for this conversation.
I hope it was useful, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Well, I think it was, Marty, based on the comments in the chat. So thank you again for your time. I think this will be one of the highlights for the year. So I'm making the call already. It's only April. So thanks, Marty.